Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Dr. Amirah. She is the founder of Soul Mystic School, a modern mystery school for psychic development and energy mastery. She's the author of 5 books, including Manifesting Miracles 101 and Love Up Your Life, and was featured in the documentaries To Death and Back Again and Angels Among Us. She's been practicing psychic medium, spiritual mentorship, and quantum healing, and after having a life-changing near-death experience while traveling in Egypt. She is the past host of Lessons from the Light radio podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm super excited to be here.
And we were talking a little bit before we started to record, and I had to stop us because there's so much I want to get into. But where I usually start interviews with guests is your story and how you've come to be Dr. Amirah.
Well, thank you. It's been quite a journey. I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version. Okay.
Sweet.
I don't even know if Reader's Digest is around anymore. But, I grew up in Canada. I grew up in a conservative family. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school for 12 years. I never got in trouble all the way through school. I was an honor student and a hard worker. And I was always very, very sensitive. I had a father that his brother committed suicide. I believe I was 8. And I'll never forget, that was my first experience of watching or seeing my dad cry. And I remember just standing there, just feeling so painful and not being able to help him. My mother was holding him and as he was grieving because he found his brother who had shot himself basically in the head. So then, my dad was an alcoholic. I thought I had a normal family, which, yeah, I guess at the time it was a normal dysfunctional family. My mom was an enabler and always I was one of those people as a young sensitive, I was always trying to keep the peace. And yet I was so sensitive. I would often be said, stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Or why are you crying now? I mean, I would be upset if, a kid at school played a trick on me and threw a water bomb on me. Well, any kid would probably be upset with that. But I was the kid that my mom knew when I walked in that it wasn't a good day, right? I was always looking for friends. I was always curious. I always found myself going out and building relationships and building friendships. So what happened was, I think I was a 10. My mother had a brother and sister that died 2 days apart. Now, my aunt was a nun in the Catholic Church, and my uncle, well, he was only 30 years old. My aunt was 24. That was pretty significant because it was sudden for my aunt. Well, we knew about a month before. My uncle was sudden. He died of cirrhosis of the liver, but he was a non-drinker. So it was a moment in time where I remember the chaos, and I remember people coming over with casseroles. And again, I was sort of numb. Like, what is this? I didn't know what it meant. She went to heaven, and the nuns or the convent all descended on our home. And it's funny because they told us that my aunt wasn't part of our family. So they only informed the family a month before she passed. And so there was a lot of discussion about the family being upset with this, right? We didn't know. And their comment was, she was part of their family, God's family. She wasn't part of our family. So we didn't need to know. And so that was pretty significant in terms of me even trying to understand. One of the nuns befriended me because I was so sensitive and always crying. She would write me letters for years. And she was so graceful and peaceful and supportive. She was the first really mentor that I had that reminded me that I was pretty, or this, that I was smart. And so that was my first experience with religion shutting us down. My mom stopped going to church. And by the time I got to high school, I would go with friends to their churches. I was curious. I remember the first time I thought, if I go in that church, I might not come out. I might die. Like, what's going to happen? It was so ingrained in me that this was a really bad thing to do, a bad idea. But I went and I lived. And so I laugh about that because that was, I think, my quest that began for finding out who is God, who is Jesus, and wanting a connection. My grandfather died. I was having connections and visions with my aunt, but I didn't know what to do with it. My grandfather passed from the same family, and Grandpa gave me a dream before he passed. And then he showed me on the path. We were both walking along. We were holding hands, and Grandpa just dropped my hand, and he didn't speak. He spoke to me telepathically. It's like, I'm going this way. I'm taking this fork in the road. You're going this way. And I just knew that his journey on earth was going to end. And pardon me, I went camping with some friends that weekend, and we were sitting around the campfire, and I just blurted out, what am I going to wear to the funeral? They're like, what funeral? What are you talking about? Got home, and my mom met me at the gate and mentioned that my grandfather had passed. I knew in the moment. And so that was my, I guess you could say, curiosity with death that continued to build. And I continued to, by the time I was 20, I had been to 20 funerals. So, and Catholic funerals were not anything, I mean, everybody just cried. And so, but I was starting to feel like there was something more, there was something beyond this. And so I held on to that fascination until, well, no, I guess it was really a pivot point of my dad's death. And when I went home, I was living in San Diego at the time, and I went home to Canada for my dad's funeral. And well, he was in the process of making his transition, and it was gruesome. It was painful. And he was in ICU for 2 weeks. So that was back in 1990. So you can just imagine, we didn't have internet. We didn't really have anything to communicate, or to understand what was going on. They had hooked him up with life support, but it was just pushing his body up and down, the forcing air into the lungs to make it look like he was alive. Meanwhile, his whole body was shrinking. And we were waiting, talk about crazy, we were waiting for my aunts to arrive from Florida and California, respectively. And so the rest of us just kind of suffered watching this. It was just incredibly painful. I'd go home and just cry and sob, and it was torment for me. The doctors kept saying any minute, and that went on for 2 weeks. So I empathize with people that, with families that's into Alzheimer's or a long delayed death, it feels like torture. So at the same time, I was going through a divorce. I had just started my divorce. In fact, yeah, it was, I don't want to go down that road, but it was something that was in process. So after Dad's death, I was at a real low, and I was going home. I was flying back. I picked up this book. I think it was in the Vancouver airport, Many Lives, Many Masters. And that was the first glimmer into, yes, we do go on. Because my internal question is, what happens when we die? Where do we go? What is all this? So it was really driven home with my dad's death, and it was like my wake-up call. And by the time I got back to my job, my health was failing. I was not going to work. And back those days, they could can you for that. So they did. They fired me. So I was going through divorce. My dad died, and now I had no money and no job. And at the time, I was making a very high not six figures. I was high 5 figures. And back in the 90s, that was significant, right? But then nothing, and no support from anybody. So I was in a real, talk about dark night of the soul, and then having no energy. The doctor told me, yeah, well, you look like you're dying. You go home and prepare your affairs. You're either going to die or you'll end up in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Well, that's not good news for anybody. That's the worst thing possible that I could have heard at the time. And so I went home and I, to use your word, grieved. At the time, I would call that a holy hell. I was just miserable. I was falling apart at the seams from every angle. Didn't know who to talk to. I was new in the States. I was only here about 3 years by then. And so I didn't have strong relationships. I didn't have a good support system. So when everything hit the fan, after crying for 2 weeks, and a friend said, you need acupuncture. Try this, Amirah. That'll help your health. So God bless her. I had no other options. The doctor threw me to the curb, right? It was just like, okay, well, this is some hope. Let's try this out. So that's when I started down the avenue of alternative care. So again, back in the early 90s, it was almost like you were doing back office an abortion or something when you talk about acupuncture. Like mama was the word. Nobody. Oh, that was horrible. But I had no other options. I went for it. And so that progressed, and I got better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And I built some businesses, some entrepreneurial endeavors, and I started working with gemstones and making custom jewelry. I started expanding that to an international market. So I was doing really, really well, but not making enough money. But my health was restoring, and I started feeling and stronger. And I felt like there was something missing in my life. Like I had the money now, business was in I got hired in the tech industry. So my health was getting better. The divorce was finished. I had more money coming in, and I'm like, fine, okay, I'm good. But something's missing. So I told a friend that I was feeling a sense to go to Egypt, and she gave me a brochure. And I found myself a few months later as soon as I said, well, I'll go if I get my tax return, and I got to pay for this. Sure enough, I manifested this tax return refund. And so I go to Egypt, which was an incredible spiritual journey. We meditated in temples. It was when I landed in Egypt, it was the strangest feeling. I know this sounds weird, but I felt like I was home. And it was a sense of being so familiar, yet I had never, I didn't study Egypt. It wasn't on my bucket list. I wasn't somebody that was fascinated. I did maybe a science report in school or something, but that was it. Book report, or what do they call that? Social studies project. Okay, so this was an amazing experience of learning about the ancient teachings, learning about the mystery schools, and I gravitated towards that. It just made sense to me. Well, I met someone there, and I extended my stay after the trip was over. Went down to Luxor from Cairo, where the tour ended. Went down to Luxor and hung out for a week. And I said, I'd really like to get some antiquities for the jewelry that I make, some beads. Well, this was a very, very primitive village right outside the Valley of the Kings, where all the ancient pharaohs' tombs are buried. And so this little village, people, their homes are perched up right at the backside of this mountain where all the tombs are. And so people would be digging through their back wall. So these houses are literally built on the mountain, right? They're digging at night, and they're trying to find tombs or antiquities or any kind of treasure. So they're trying to work ahead of the Ministry of Antiquities, digging. And so they would have these, Arabic carpets hanging on the back wall to cover up the tunnel. So I knew from that there's a high likelihood some of these people would have beads. We're just talking some small beads. Nobody's going to notice this antiquity leaving the country, right? That was my logic. And so anyway, we found a guy, and he showed me the beads, and I think there was a handful, and he wanted $300, and I didn't have that much cash at the time. So I said, I'll come back tomorrow with the cash, go to the ATM, come back. Now, that was the day I was leaving. So it was about noontime, hot as heck. And we go back to pay Mohammed his money. And when you have a transaction like that, or you're a friend, especially I was a special guest because my friend Juju was brought me there. They bring out the Coca-Cola or a tea, coffee, water. You sit and visit. It's very polite. It's not just a slam bam, thank you, ma'am, pay and run. It's not like that at all. So here I am, the only female, and they bring out this green garden lawn chair, right? I'm sitting on this plastic chair, and all of a sudden they bring out this joint. And Muhammad says, it's the best, it's the best. And he's screaming, and I'm, coming from this dysfunctional family, I'm feeling agitated myself, and I've disturbed the peace, so to speak. He's shouting, and Egyptians are very vocal and loud and, expressive. Let's call it that way. And I said, I don't smoke, and I had tried pot a few times. It didn't really do anything for me. And I just was like, no, thank you. And then the shouting continued. So I'm thinking, oh God, I've insulted the man. I've gone against their protocol. And now I'm the only woman here. I should do something here because this could escalate. So I thought, okay, it's not done anything for me in the past. Maybe I'll just acquiesce, be a graceful guest, and I'll be on my way. Nothing will happen, right? Okay. Didn't happen that way. The joint went around twice, and all of a sudden they have these workers that are chiseling alabaster outside the factory entrance. And so they all of a sudden showed up in this showroom. And so there's like 8 or 10 of us in this room. So one joint goes around the circle twice, and everybody bounces up. They're ready to walk out the door, except for me. I can't get out of the chair. I'm sitting there. Only I find myself standing behind myself, and I'm witnessing all the people that are in the room. It's like they have an individual television, and I'm watching this video play out on their screen. And I'm just horrified, and I'm like, what the heck is this? I need to stay in my body. I need to get back. I need to come back. And so I thought to myself, I was coming and going, coming in and out. It was sort of a subtle phase. Well, I must have said something. I don't recall hearing myself verbalize, but I definitely had my hands out in front of me. And I just thought, I need water. If I could splash my face with this water, I'll stay here. I won't leave. I just knew I needed to stay. And so obviously they're laughing, and everything's in slow motion at this time for me. And my friend Juju must have either sensed that I need water, or they also were aware that a lot of Westerners get dehydrated. So that was a part of the front and center for their awareness. So he comes towards me with the water bottle, and he pours water in my hands. And I remember getting it right about, 6 inches from my face, thinking, oh shit, my mascara is going to run. That was the last thought. And I blacked out. Now, what they informed me and filled in the points at this point, my body stiffened. And according to my friend Juju, my breathing stopped, my heart stopped, and he was pounding my chest with all his might to get my heart going. Call that jokingly Egyptian CPR. And he was just going to beating the drum, so to speak. They dragged me out under the arms, dragged me out into a pickup truck. So the pickup trucks there are the taxis. They've got benches along the back of the box, but they stuck me in the cab. So there's the driver, and Juju's in the middle, and I'm on the outer edge. They've got my head propped up outside the window, trying to give me air, some oxygen. And they're barreling down this dusty, sandy road to nowhere, as far as I know. So I'm out of it. The next thing I remember is coming through the night sky and hurling through the sky like I was a comet, and towards a familiar blue ball way off in the distance. And I'm like, oh, that's where I'm going. And that little ball got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was like so massive. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to find myself? And then the next thought was, well, I heard this talking language. but I had no clue. And I'm like, I don't know that language. I don't know where that is. And then it went, that's Arabic. I'm in Egypt. It was like a GPS beacon that was just directing me to where my body was. And then it felt like I was trying to put on wet clothes. Have you ever put on wet clothes after going swimming or getting, thrown in the water? It's miserable. It's cold and yucky and it's just awful. So I felt like I was struggling to get in my body, like putting on wet clothes for about 20 minutes. It wasn't that long, but felt like that. At the same time, the bright light was incredibly painful to my eyes, and it hurt almost to coming into my body. At the same time, I felt this incredible, overwhelming bliss and love and peace. And so it was a peculiar experience. And, Juju stayed with me. Basically what happened, then I realized I'm in my body and I'm hearing these voices and I can't open my eyes, and I reach over and I touched his arm. Well, he just, like the dead man coming alive or the mummy. So he was very animated. And I'm thinking, I don't know what the problem is here. I said, where are you taking me? And he blurted out something in Arabic, which then he realized she doesn't speak Arabic. I have to speak English. So they were highly excited. This was extremely difficult. I said, well, I need a bathroom. Now, here's another problem, Victoria. Back in those days, there were no Western sized type toilets in the Valley of the Kings, in that primitive village. There were holes in the ground, okay? And there's these little porcelain markers where you put your feet. I couldn't stand, and I didn't know that. And I didn't even realize there was something problem with the toilets, okay? So I'm saying, they said, well, we're taking you to the hospital. And I'm thinking, oh shit, a hospital? I'm in primitive country here. That'll kill me if I go to some germ-ridden place in the boondocks. So that was where I was at. I'm like, oh, I just need a toilet, please. I'm fine. And so there was some negotiations back in Arabic. And so they finally figured it out. Oh, his brother had a flat that was Europeanized. Okay. And so the facilities were appropriate for a woman. That's another issue, because in that culture back at that time, a man cannot go into a private space like that with a woman. This is the worst. This is like the worst crime known to man. I mean, they would stone a woman probably for doing that openly. So here I am in their flat, their apartment, and I won't let him leave me in the bathroom. They carried me up the stairs. He's on this edge of this bathtub sitting next to me, and his tears are just streaming down his face. And I'm blissed out. I'm thinking I'm so proper. I've modestly covered my legs so nothing's exposed. And I'm thinking everything's cool. The sister-in-law is beating down the door. She's frantic because a man and a woman are in the bathroom. She's thinking they're having sex. That's their primitive mindset at the time. Well, nothing I could say or do, and I didn't realize what all was going on. I'm completely blissed. And he just said, you died. You don't understand. He said, you died. So fast forward, I was on the bed. They brought me into the bedroom. I'm laying there recovering. They brought me water and yogurt and an orange. And it was the strangest experience, because the orange, it was cut orange. They also knew, as a Westerner, I couldn't have any other type of food. It needs to be peeled, or it needs to be boiled, or something like that. So the yogurt was safe, and they suspected I was dehydrated or something was amiss with my electrolytes, right? Because they've seen it. And Westerners are just not. Oh, and I failed to mention I had done a 30-day detox prior to going to Egypt. So I was primed, plus I had this 2-week spiritual journey prior to that. So I was primed and hypersensitive to all of these types of things, right? But I was oblivious to it. So what happens is I start seeing this being, this entity. Her name is Sekhmet. She's a lion's face with a female body. She was just a statue to me, going through Egypt, I didn't relate to all the Egyptology and all the beings and the deities. And it was overwhelming, right? When you first go and you just, okay, it's a nice story, or, that's their religion. And it just didn't resonate. But I'm seeing her in the wood grain of the armoire, and I'm thinking I'm losing my mind. And there's a window with the Nile Valley there, and there's these sheer draperies fluttering inside the room. The wind was, or the breeze was coming into the room, and I see the bright blue sky and this brilliant emerald green Nile Valley. I'm looking out there. That's real. I can't look at this. This is not real. And from that moment on, I have been seeing beings and entities. At first, it felt like I stepped into a scene in the Star Wars movie, The Cantina, where all these strange beings and deities, and actually it was overwhelming. But so the first part of it, I was still blissing out and denying I was seeing that. I was trying to focus on something that was tangible. And Juju escorted me to Cairo. I got my tour guide was there waiting in line, and I remember asking her, well, who's that lion goddess with female body? And she said, oh, that's Sekhmet. Sekhmet is the healer of healers. She was the patron saint in Egypt. She was known by all the doctors. They would pray to her. Okay, that's nice information. I get on the plane. I sleep all the way back to JFK. It's like it was an 8-hour flight, but it probably had been 15 hours to this point by the time I get to JFK. And I get there, I get off the jetway, and all the people look like black and white paper dolls. And I'm freaking out. I'm all by myself. And I'm like, this is horrible. I'm horrified what I'm seeing. And I don't want to come back here. This place, America, is horrible. It's angry. It's depressed. It's grief-stricken. It was very low vibration. It's like literally I stepped off a jetway into another dimension, and I went, and I kept looking at my book, and I realized at one point it was upside down. I couldn't read it, but I wanted to focus on something that was real, and none of that out there was real. That continued until I got to San Diego. I got off the plane. So it had probably been about a 24-hour journey, the whole thing. Get off the plane, and that moist air hit me, and it was like, okay, I'm back. And that noise stopped. However, for about 9 months, I was stuck in a very deep depression. 1, I didn't want to be here. 2, I didn't know what the F happened. I was confused. So this was in 1998. There was no internet. There was no resources. So I started going to psychics and healers or anybody. I definitely didn't want to go see a psychologist, because I'm like, they're going to lock me up and throw away the key. There is no freaking way I'm going to those people. I know something happened. I am different. However, I haven't lost my mind. I was that hardworking student. I was that, type A personality, responsible and honest. And so I went to all these healers, and you know what? I got really ticked off because they told me something different, every single one, because they didn't know. And then I finally got the message. Okay, I got to figure it out myself. I get it. Okay. I found a friend brought me to Mexico. I found this healer. She reads cards, but she wasn't a healer. She was a card reader. And she's saying in Spanish to my friend, she goes, I don't understand the cards. It says she died. This card should be over here in the future, this death card, but it says she died. So we kind of looked at each other like, yep, okay, thanks a lot. That validates something like that happened. I went back to Egypt the following year, and my friend Juju brought me to see a holy man in the far south of Egypt, in Aswan. And he was just a guy that would hang out in the market in this little not a kiosk, but they had these little shops, right, with all these shawls or whatever it was. We brought him a very luxurious gift. And I said, what happened? Of course, Juju was explaining or translating to this holy man. And he said, she didn't die in Arabic, in their mind, their level of understanding. He said, but she went very, very, very far away. So technically my body wasn't buried and I wasn't, entombed, but I went very, very far away. So that helped me understand. And then when I came back, I continued asking. A friend of mine that was on the trip referred me to another healer. And this healer, he was looking at my energy and he said, "Oh, he said, you've got some stuck energy." And I'm like, okay, that's something to do. I get to undo that stuck energy then, right? It seemed pretty simple to me. And I did. I began starting to understand the nuances of my energy and what that all meant. And within about 6 months, I started feeling happier. I started sleeping better. I was more inspired. My creativity was coming back. I wasn't a bitch on wheels, because when I first came back, I fired all my friends. I stopped all my hobbies. I got fired from my job again because I was just miserable. It wasn't fun to be around. It wasn't fun to be anywhere. I wanted to go home. I didn't want to be here at all. So I figured I got to write about this story. So I go to the book expo and I'm trying to think I can hook up with an agent or a publisher. I didn't know how this whole thing worked. And only to be rejected. People looked at me like, you got to be crazy. You were just hallucinating, girl. This is cuckoo crazy. And hey, I finally they give away all these books. And so I guess I was a glutton and I filled these 2 linen bags with these big, heavy, hardbound books. And so my back was breaking and I said, I need a massage desperately. So I found this Chinese massage place. I go to the massage and this guy's walking on my back and it hurt like hell. And I had a spontaneous out-of-body experience. So this whole year, it was less than a year, maybe about 9 months, I had been asking, where did I go? What happened? I'm different. And I've been searching. Where did I go? I know I'm different, but what, now what? So that's when I had this out-of-body experience and I was transported, teleported. I was greeted by this being. It was almost like my body appeared with this being that was just like an egg-shaped, fuzzy white energy, a presence. And my body literally melted and I created this life form, light form. And the guide said to me, I'm going to take you on a tour of the all, but you can't stay. And so there I was escorted into this place. It was this grand, incredible building. I struggle to this day to describe it. It was ultimate perfection and beauty. The precision was beyond anything that earth words can describe. And I was merged into a conference room. And my sense is there were 12 people. I didn't count them, but it felt like there was a board or a committee of 12. And they were all dressed identical. Very 3D-like, in like suits and proper and formal. And then their heads were glowing. And at the top of their head, it was like a lid open, like a teapot. And there was this glowing ball of light that just streamed into my head, right into my third eye, I guess you could say. And they said to me, you can know anything you need to know whenever you need to know it. And instantly I was teleported out of there and I was standing with my guide. It was like not visible. There was a presence with the guide communicating. And there I was standing in front of this corridor that went on for infinity. And there were doors on either side of the corridor that said, and my guide said, you can enter any door that you choose. You can't stay. So I went to the easiest route. I took the first door on my right. It was a gold door. And I stepped through it. It was like I merged through it. And I stepped into what felt like a kaleidoscope of color. And it was moving patterns. And it was incredibly rich, warm, comforting, embracing in ways that the only way I can describe it was like going back into mama's womb and feeling the love and the support and the safety. And I said, what is this? And the voice said to me, this is the fabric of all creation. This is love. And I was just so immersed into it and so still and so full. And then I was thumped out. And I'm like, kind of rude. I was liking this. I wanted to stay there. And then I went across the corridor. I entered this door across the way. It was pink. And I emerged through that door, and it was a solid green, emerald green energy. I said, well, what's this? And they told, what I then saw was my life review. And I saw a timeline of my own life, all the places where my emotions had gotten stuck or interfered with what I was creating or my flow. I could see that I created my destruction. I created the dysfunction and the dis-ease in my life with my emotions. And being highly emotional, that's how I did it. And those emotions weren't flowing, and I was very attached to them and that way of being. I knew in an instant I needed to go home. Home. I needed to detox. And the detox was not only the physical body, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. And I realized in that moment that that was my purpose. And to understand who I am and that everything was energy. I had stepped into the quantum field. I understood it at a level that was beyond my words or my vocabulary at the time. I think finally when I came across Deepak Chopra, I'm like, oh, I get it. This is where I went. This is what it is. And this is the explanation that, and my guide told me that meditation was crucial for all of it, for all of our disease, all of our dysfunction, and that there is tools to practice, that it was a journey. And so for 23 years now, I've been doing this work. And yes, I still see beings. I connect with loved ones on the other side because they're just changed forms. And I'm able to access that and receive information. I'm also have the ability to heal them if they're a sense of being stuck. So Victoria, I feel like I've just fire hosed you here with the story and didn't take a breath, and I apologize.
Well, that's okay. And do you have to go soon?
No, I'm good. I feel like when it starts coming, the stream of information, it's like I get so excited to get it out and to share that I often don't take a breath myself. So,
Well, I felt like I was listening to an audiobook. Like it was just, I was envisioning it as you were talking and just felt like I was kind of experiencing it with you in a sense. Um, so there was a couple questions that I thought of along the way as you were speaking. Can you speak to a little bit when you were feeling it in your darkest place, physically, when your body was starting to break down, what did that actually look like? Like, what were you struggling with physically?
I can remember driving to work after my dad died and having to pull over to the side of the road and just overwhelming tears and sobbing. And I had already started personal development work, and I had been healing my relationship with my dad. So I thought we were good. And when he died, I was so freaking mad. He was a dirty, rotten bastard for dying and leaving me, that we just got going in terms of healing what we had. And I just felt so gypped, losing both men in my life that were significant, and the divorce and my dad. And I became completely dysfunctional. Like I said, miserable. I was heavy. I was negative. I was So over time that built up. And then the doctor told me I had chronic fatigue syndrome.
Mm.
So, they don't know how to diagnose that. They lump that in with everything. And
Mhm.
it's my belief system that fibromyalgia, you name it, you name it. In fact, I can see the beginnings of cancer. In fact, before the show, we were talking about a client that had recently lost, well, one client lost her son to suicide a year ago. Another client, her friend, wasn't my client yet. She lost her son 17 years ago. Now, that woman of 17 years is hanging on to that energy of the loss. And her fear of letting that go is that she'll lose connection with her son and perhaps, be a bad mom as a result of that. You just have to. Whereas the other lady who has been healing those energies of loss and pain and just incredible separation, that feeling of separation, she's thriving. She's doing things that she hasn't done in years. She's having a great connection with her son now. She can actually feel him come and give her a hug. And so I find the contrast so fascinating, not as a judgment, but as I think as hope, or as a lesson, as a possibility that there are other ways that we can still have that connection with our loved one. I talk to my dad all the time, and when I pull out his hunting knife and I'm cutting something, I always feel him coming, like, watch your fingers, young lady. It's like every single time he comes in for that.
I
Yeah.
think that's a great I'm glad this came up because I think people tend to focus on that separation, like you said. Like the focus is just the separation. Like, I'm never going to see them again. I'm never going to speak to them again. I'm never going to hug them or touch them or pick up the phone and call them again. It's that the focus is so much on the separation that you can't even fathom the idea that the relationship is continuing, right?
Yes.
That's still
Yes.
a relationship that's
Yes.
continuing, but it's so unhealthy and dysfunctional
Right.
and not self-serving at all.
Yeah.
And only
And it's hurting other people too, because
exactly.
you're affecting the entire family or friends, and all your other relationships suffer. So you have to, if we can have a moment and just think in terms of, I know when we're grieving, we're not thinking of anybody else. We're really self-absorbed
Mhm.
most of the time. I was, and it was all me and my pain, and I didn't have the bandwidth for anybody else. But I can honestly say I've been divorced over 30 years now. My ex-husband committed suicide in COVID. And
Mm.
I know there's a growing number of suicides and depression that people are experiencing. And what I'd like to say to that is I couldn't connect with him for a very long time. And as a medium, as somebody that does talk to the dead, I thought, well, this is interesting. When a client comes to me, for instance, my client whose son had committed suicide a year ago, I couldn't connect with him at first. And the first impression I got was his energy, let's call it a package of energy. And he was stuck in an elevator and he wasn't going up or down, and it was confined. And I could see that there was drug induced. And so there was a question of, was it accidental or was it intentional? But I also saw the depression. So it all sort of came together. It wasn't a place of blaming one thing, and I think as
Mhm.
this, those of us grieving or left behind, we want to have a reason. We want to pinpoint what exactly it was I don't know, as if it's going to help ease our pain or maybe our guilt that we should have known something. So when we connected with him, I'm trying to remember, see, because I'm in a slight trance when I look and connect. So I don't remember my stories crystal clear unless we talk about it. And so my client and we've talked about it many, many times as it comes up. But so I can see the energy where they're stuck, and I can move the energy. So like I understand in religions, they talk about limbo or purgatory.
Mm.
And I would say that's probably the zone. It's like a zone. Like when I came back from my near death, I think I was stuck in a limbo that was freaking depressing. It was horrible, that zone. And so just like when we leave the body, it's my understanding that can happen also. Now, I've also connected with loved ones on the other side who committed suicide, who weren't stuck. Okay, so it's not a blanket statement. So in my own husband, I did some clearing and I did all the work and tried to connect, because this was a man. The reason we got divorced is I couldn't be me. I couldn't express my need to connect with spirituality. He wasn't having anything about it.
Mm.
So that was the sort of the breaking point for us. Well, he lived his whole life atheist, and he didn't believe in anything. So that's why I think I'm such a advocate for, increasing our self-awareness and awakening our consciousness to all that we are, because guess what? That's the only freaking thing we take with us is our consciousness. And I've been witnessing that and communicating with that. And yes, we can affect those loved ones that seem to be stuck. Okay. For some reason, it's like our energy as a soul in this human body has seniority. That's something for I don't know the hierarchy, but it's my understanding and from my experience. So in doing the work for my ex-husband, Dave, I cleared the energy. Then one day I was walking on my path where all the cardinals come seem to say hello to me. And this one day, all of a sudden I felt Dave. And I'm like, wow, I wasn't looking for it or expecting, and he had the attitude of your first love, like when you're a puppy love and you're so sweet on somebody and you're kind of embarrassed or shy. And that's how he was. He was like a young soul that didn't really know how this worked, and that he was just beginning at his level of comprehension of what love was. And he was reflecting to me some of the things he did for me. Like, I didn't think it was very funny or nice for a vacuum for Christmas. And he he thought that was loving. Okay. And so back in those days, I was fit to be tied. And, so I was getting to laugh at some of these ridiculous things that I got spun up over, but he was showing me that he really, really did love me. And that was incredibly healing for me. It's been all these years and a surprise. And it was 2 years after he passed that I was finally able to connect with him. I didn't work on it and intend on it, uh, and make it like I had to. But that's what happens when we heal. It's us that needs to heal. Then the communication, they're right there.
So is that your tip? Is that people work on healing themselves so that
Absolutely.
they can connect?
Absolutely. We're always, like, you and I are telepathically connected, and it's just because they've changed forms doesn't mean they're not communicating or they're not able to communicate. It's us, it's the receiver that's been dumbed down or dulled out. And just the frequency, we have to raise our frequency to have that connection. It's just like sometimes you can call somebody and have all the static on the line, or it's intermittent, and you go, you know what, let's just hang up. You call again and boom, it's good, right? And that's like that with communicating with spirit. So you don't need a medium, but you need to get clear. And I find one of the very basic tools that I teach people, because people don't know how to be present. See, because if they're stuck thinking about how their loved one died, or some things they didn't say, or they wish it could be different, they wish Johnny was with us at Christmas, or it's his birthday today, then you're stuck in the past. Your energy is literally in that past experience, that moment in time. And what that does overall is it reduces your frequency, and you're stuck in what I call depression. You're not present. And so in the work I do is we learn to really reaccumulate our own energies, our vibes, and raise that so that we can be happier, so we are more inspired, so we are more motivated and fluid. And then it's like one, opportunities open up, new situations. You present yourself in ways that you couldn't have expected. You know, my client that I was sharing, when we cleared her energy and she was able to have that communication with her son, she started wearing shorts for the first time in 30 years. Right. And she said, I'm cutting up and I'm goofing off and she goes, my daughter doesn't even know me like this. So parts of herself that she'd shut off, maybe when she became a mom, that's the moment in time. Okay, now I got to be serious. I got to grow up. And those aspects to our personality or what's in our heart kind of get lost. Yeah. So it is work. It's raising our awareness to being present, having the appropriate tools. How can I do this? You know, if it's, I'm not a subscriber to talk therapy because in my own moments of grief, I got sick and tired of just talking about it. Like, I'm a bottom line girl. Give me some freaking way to get rid of it because I don't like
Tools.
this feeling to be caught in this loop.
Exactly. And so, like, even for what the work that I do with grievers, it's action based. You're
Yeah,
always taking action. There's steps, it's a process,
right.
it's evidence based. Yes, I'm totally, and it's transform my life and my grief too.
Yes, yes. And, you know, like we were talking, I mean, you can be sacked from your job. That's grief.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can, yes, losing a loved one is probably the ultimate, but losing a relationship, that's a heavy grief. And how do
Loss
we,
of health,
yes.
and
And
all of it
I had all of those at
accumulates.
once.
Yeah.
And I'm not alone. I know there's millions of people doing the same shit that I did. And so, because we've not been taught the nuances of our energy and how our thoughts are creating.
Can I ask you a question? Because something came up because in
Sure.
my own personal experience with my
Uh-huh.
own energy, right?
Uh-huh.
So I think, as time, we can go through periods where, like for me personally, like I've been on and off the health wagon for many years, on and off, on and off. What I've discovered just in the last month is nutrition and how food is fuel and food is chi, right? Energy.
Yes. Yes.
Everything you eat is energy. The plants, the animals, this is energy. And if you are consistently, and especially in grief, or if you're depressed, stress can be a big one. Like, what are you reaching for? The sugary cake or
Of course.
probably not the salad, right?
No,
So,
no.
so what chi do you want? If you already are low vibe and you're already down and out and you're feeling in the dumps, that sugary cake is not going to bring you up, right? It's not going to bring up your chi. So when you were going through like that deep depressive period in your life, I imagine you were probably so terribly under eating
Yeah.
and not caring for
Wrongly. Yeah.
wrongly eating. I actually heard something not that long ago about vegetarians, about how vegetarians can actually come off as very angry people
Yeah.
because they don't eat protein. But what they
Right.
don't realize is that they're still eating living things, right? So it's
Yeah.
like they don't want to eat meat like a
Because it's an
cow because
animal.
it's animal, but a plant is a living thing too, right?
I know they have no problem killing that
Right. So
or spraying it with poison and then
yes.
eating it. Well, that's a whole nother podcast because back in those days in the 90s, and when I discovered with chronic fatigue, I started colon cleansing. I
Mm.
started doing detoxes. Like I said, 1 year before I went to Egypt, I started doing 30-day detoxes twice a year. And I was into juicing and I was into enemas and coffee enemas and you name it. Well, and at one point I was vegan. Then I went to a mix, right? So I've seen the journey across the board. Now, because things were so compromised as a young girl with my emotions and eating all the carbs growing up and sandwiches every day to go to school. And I believe my immune system is still compromised. So now we understand about leaky gut. We understand, hey, I've been in the process of healing. It's a long journey. And I've recently switched to carnivore, which I have to say, I don't tell many people, and I don't admit, but I am absolutely loving it. And I'm shocked at my own self, because there was one time I would say to you, if you're eating animal, you're, going to the hell or but I, as a vegetarian, complete vegetarian for a number of years, I got very sick. I got anemic, right? And so all of these, broad range and scope swings that I've done to do, desperate to heal myself. I think the biggest, most important thing I've done is my energy. And when we have energy that's stuck, that will make us crave carbs. Because today, even though I'm now carnivore in like 6 or 9 months, I know people that have been a carnivore for 14 years. And the thing of it is that cow is eating all the nutrients and pre-digesting it. It's going into the meat. So that's the argument. So my health has improved. Inflammation has been reduced, and cravings have pretty much stopped. So it's a shock to me, and I'm delighted. However, as I said, I'm working on it, and I'm actually gaining weight. Now, is it because my body's still, a lot of things, adrenals, etc. But one thing I noticed is when I'm teaching a class or working with clients, 2 days before, I'm like, shit. And I find myself driving to the store and getting that butter pecan ice cream. I'm like, what the fuck? I don't need this. It's somebody's energy literally plugging into me. I get on the call with them. You don't like butter pecan ice cream by any chance, do you? That's my favorite. So unknowingly, I've been affected by this person's energy that was seeking me and looking for their answers or their healing. And so it does affect us, especially ultra sensitive people. So if all of a sudden, like the other night, I was craving chocolate, that's not normally on my list, but I'm like, okay, somebody's energies permeated my space. We can't completely stop energy. You can't stop energy from moving. It's just the nature of it. So we have to learn tools. We have to learn how to be grounded, how to not protect, because that's a sense that you can actually control energy. You can't, you can manage it.
Mm-hmm.
So learning all of that is key.
It can only be moved or transformed.
Yes. Yes. And so whether it's grief, whether it's gaining around your waistline, whether it's a new job, whether it's a relationship, we're creating all of that with our energy, with our thoughts, with our consciousness. And so we got to start somewhere, right? So let's start with being aware, grounding, being present.
Gosh, we could talk so much. I
I
mean,
know. It's so exciting, Victoria.
but I'm so glad you like that the conversation went with the carnivore because I'm eating more protein than I've had in years. I spent years trashing my metabolism.
Right.
And it's a vicious cycle, and then you have the cortisol and the middle section weight
and you believe all the doctors. Well, listen, there's a lot of cardiologists now and other mainstream doctors that are starting to go this route. So I'm just open to exploring. And I didn't tell anybody for the longest time because I'm my own lab rat. Like, I'm going to try it. And then if it works for me, then I'll share it with other clients. But hey, I'm shocked and I'm delighted.
But I think one of the key things you said was when the pendulum swings so far one way, where you're just a vegetarian and that's all you're doing. Any one way isn't balance.
Well, and the thing of it is, I've met so many vegetarians that are completely ungrounded. They can't get their life together. They struggle in most cases, not all, but they struggle in some ways, and that is being present, or you can just see the life force energy isn't strong or bright usually with them. Now, again, I'm not talking about the the monk or the guru from India. I'm
Mhm.
talking about Western
Mhm.
and living this lifestyle. So yeah.
Are we getting close
Yeah,
on time?
we're getting close on time.
Okay.
And we
Well,
gotta go.
I definitely want to have you back because there's so much more I want to talk about with you, if that's okay.
Oh, I'd love that.
A
Thank you.
part
I'm honored.
two. Okay.
Yes,
And I do want to give you an opportunity to share what you have coming up or where people can find you, reach out to you if they want to learn more about you.
great. Yes. I'm hosting a 21 speaker series with incredibly brilliant and amazing experts. And so you can go to intuitivesuperpowerssummit.com. Intuitive Superpowers with an S, summit.com. And yeah, go to my website. I've got a free gift. It's called Stress Buster. And you go to my website, amirahhall.com slash / stress buster.com.
And I'll get those links in the
Yeah.
show
All right.
notes as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So Stress Buster, and that's like an energy shower, and you can start. You can start clearing your energy and moving in the direction of coming into alignment and connecting with your loved one.
And you also have an affiliate link, right? Or
Yeah,
20%
I
off
do.
code. Okay. What is that?
I don't know. I'll give it to you. I'll have to
Okay.
give it to you. Is that affiliate would for promotions? Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes for 20% off whatever on your website.
Right.
That work? Yeah.
No, the affiliate is a commission. So the affiliate link will go to, like, if you wanted to promote me, you would get 20%.
Oh, okay. Sorry, folks.
You'll have to
Okay.
scrub it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. Yeah.
Okay. And where can people find you? Just your website for all the social media?
Amirahhall.com. Yes.
Mhm.
Amirah, AmirahHall.com. You can read all about me there.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for this great
And I
conversation.
just want to invite people, if something triggered something within you, reach out to me on my website. There's a link and you can book a 20-minute consultation. And we'll just talk about maybe what your next step is or where you feel that maybe you need help. Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you
Thank
so
you. Thank you
much.
again. It's been such an honor. Thank you for opening your heart and doing the work you're doing. It's truly amazing. And I feel very blessed to be connected with you.
Same. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.